In today's lesson, I'm going to be covering factoring trinomials where a is 1 and a is not 1. Here's an example of a worked out problem. So with all of these trinomials, we're going to start with a quadratic trinomial. So what that means, just to remind you, is that there are 3 terms and that the exponent, the biggest exponent, is 2. Now, when we're looking at a trinomial like this, we are going to have each of the coefficients represented by a letter, A, B, and C. Now, our A in this case is 1, all right, and that's why A equals 1. That's what I'm talking about there. Now, the coefficient with the x squared, or whatever variable you're talking about squared, is the A. The one with just the plain variable is the B, and the constant is the C. So what we're doing here is we're looking to find 2 numbers that add up to the B term and multiply to the C term, because we're undoing the multiplication or the FOIL that's already been done. So the first thing you're going to have in each set of parentheses is your x, or whatever variable you're talking about. And what I like to do is I like to list out my factors of what I'm trying to multiply to. So in this case, it's 6. So 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So a reminder that these are the numbers that multiply to give you this number. So 6 in this case. So now I want to look, out of those combinations, which combination of numbers adds up to 5, or my B term here? And that would be 2 and 3. So I'd have x plus 2 and x plus 3. Now I have these in 2 sets of parentheses right next to each other. There's nothing in between, so that means they're being multiplied together. So this is the factored form. Now we could double check that we got the right factors by multiplying this through. You guys may remember FOIL first, outside, inside, and last. It's the same process there. All right, so first I'm going to get x squared. Outside, I get 3x. Inside, I get 2x. And last, I get 6. Now notice we multiplied the 2 and the 3 together to get 6. And that's what we had to look for to find the multiplication. Now if we simplify this polynomial, we're going to end up with x squared. We combine these like terms, so 3 plus 2. That's where we add to get that 5. So 5x plus 6. All right, and we ended up right back where we started. So that's a good sign. That means we did this correctly. So let's take a look at a couple others. It's going to be really important that you are paying attention to the signs here in front of the numbers. So in this case, we're multiplying to a 48, and we're combining or adding up to a negative 14. So the first thing you can do is list out all your factors of 48. All right, and I'm going to do that here. All right, so we have 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, and 6 and 8. Now, we know that we're multiplying to a positive number. So the only combination of ways that we can multiply to a positive is by a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative. But since we see that we're adding up to a negative number, we know we have to have 2 negative signs here. So if I make all these numbers negative, what combination, when we add them together, will give us that negative 14? And that would be right here, that negative 6 and negative 8. So that means I'd have x minus 6 times x minus 8. Now, the order in which you write this does not matter. So you could have x minus 8 times x minus 6, and that would still be correct. You're going to do the same thing over here with 36. We're multiplying to 36, adding up to negative 12. So again, multiplying to a positive, adding up to a negative means we're going to have 2 negative signs here. So I'm going to set my parentheses up first. All right, and then I have 36. So I have 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. Now if I make all these negative, the combination that will give me a negative 12 is this negative 6 and negative 6. So my factored form here is x minus 6 times x minus 6. All right, now if you look at these c terms here, we see that for in this case, x squared minus 5x minus 50, we're multiplying to a negative number. So we're going to have a combination of a positive and a negative sign. Now, a lot of times students get confused on which number has the negative. So you want to look at that middle term. We're adding to a negative 5. So whatever sign is there, that's going to be on the sign on the bigger number. So we know we're going to have one of each, a plus and a minus, and this one is going to have our bigger number. All right, so if I try to find the combinations of numbers that multiply to 50, and I want to add up to negative 5, all right, I could go through all my combinations, but I would see that 5 and negative 10 would multiply to negative 50 and would give me a negative 5. So I'm going to put x plus 5 and x minus 10. Now, if we had the sign the other way around, if we had the negative 5 and a positive 10, if you combine those together, you're going to get a positive 5, which is not what you're looking for there. So that's why it's important that we choose the correct sign on the correct numbers. All right, and this last one here, we again are multiplying to a negative number, adding to a negative number. So that means we're going to have a negative and a positive, and the negative number is going to be bigger. All right, so combinations of numbers that multiply to 4. So we have 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. All right, so the combination that's going to give us what we need, we're going to have a negative on the bigger number, so that'll be on the 4 or 2. In that case, it doesn't really matter. And that would lead us to positive 1 and negative 4, adding up to that negative 3. All right, so now we're going to talk about cases where we're factoring numbers where a is not equal to 1. So this kind of looks confusing, but it's helped a lot of my students in the past to kind of organize their thoughts as they're working through a problem like this. So this thing right here is just kind of an example of what we're doing. So just a reminder, this is A, that's B, and that's C. So on the top of our X, we're going to do our A times C. So we have 3 times negative 6. That's going to give us negative 18. And then on the bottom, we're just going to write our B term, which is 7. So now, we are looking for two numbers that are going to multiply to this top number right here and add to this number here. Now, let's set up our little t-chart like we did in the last set of problems. Now we have negative 18, so I know 18, we can get that from 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. And we know since we're adding up to a positive number that it's a smaller number that's going to have the negative sign. So now I want to look for the combination that's going to add up to a 7. And I see that 9 and negative 2 will give me that positive 7. So now I'm going to go ahead and write these numbers, negative 2 and 9, in the other two sides of this X. Now next to these, I want you to put an X. Now to fill this into our parentheses, what we're going to do is we're going to start with this first term here, that's going to go in the first spot of the first set of parentheses. So 3x squared. And then we're going to take the last number, the last term here, and that's going to go in the last spot in our second set of parentheses, minus 6. Then we're going to fill in these two factors, so the negative 2x and the 9x, into our parentheses. Now, it does not matter which order you write them in. The 9x could go in the first set of parentheses. The negative 2x could go in the second set. Once you end up doing these next steps, you'll come out to the same answer. So now what you're going to do is you're going to factor out, so greatest common factor of each set of parentheses. Let's see. All right, so I can factor out of this first set of parentheses, I can factor out an x. So I'm going to write this down here. So I have x, and that leaves me with 3x minus 2. And then in my second set, I can divide out or factor out a 3. And that'll leave me with 3x minus 2. Now what you should see is that these two sets of parentheses end up being the same. So that's going to be part of your final answer. Then the other two factors here, things we factored out, that's going to go in a set of parentheses together. So x plus 3, and that is your other set of parentheses. All right, seems like a confusing process, but as you work through it a few more times, you'll get the hang of it. Let's look at the next problem. So I'm going to write my, remember, a times c in the top here and my b in the bottom. So reminder, this is what we want to multiply to. This is what we want to add to when we do our factor tree over here. You can always start by setting up your parentheses as well. So starting with that 4x squared here and that negative 28 here. All right, so we multiply a times c. So when we do that, we're going to get negative 112, and then our b is 9. All right, you can list out all your factors. And we know that the bigger number is going to be the positive one because the number that we are adding to is positive. So I'm going to make all my smaller numbers of my factors the negative ones. So I have negative 1 and 112, negative 2 and 56, negative 4 and 28, negative 7 and 16. Now I see if I add these two together, I'm going to get my 9 that I'm looking for. So I have my negative 7. I'm going to throw my x next to that. And my 16, I put my x next to that. So I have negative 7x and 16x. All right, now I'm going to, out of each set of parentheses, take my greatest common factor. So out of this first set, I can factor out an x. That leaves me with 4x minus 7. Out of the second set, I can factor out a 4, and that leaves me with 4x minus 7. And again, that's a good sign because we want these two sets of parentheses to look the same. So for our first factor, we're going to take our x plus 4 from these two, and we know it's going to be plus 4 because it's a positive 4. If it was a negative number, it would be a minus. And then we have our 4x minus 7. And that would be your answer. All right, let's try another one. All right, so my a times c, that's what we're multiplying to. That would be our 42. Our b is 17. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 42, add up to 17. We will see that we have multiple factors, but I'm going to cut to the chase. And 3 and 14 will multiply to 42 and add up to 17. So my 3x, 14x. All right, and in my set of parentheses, I have 2x squared. I have my plus 21. And then I'm just going to add in my plus 3x and then my 14x. I'm going to factor each set of parentheses, so I can factor an x out of the first set, leaving me with 2x plus 3. And I can factor out a 7 out of the second set of parentheses, which would leave me with a 2x plus 3. So my final answer would be x plus 7 and 2x plus 3. Now again, we're writing these sets of parentheses right next to each other. That means they're being multiplied. All right, our last problem here, we're going to multiply to a negative 196, add up to a negative 45. So I know my bigger number is going to have the negative on it. So these two factors are 4 and negative 49. That together will multiply to negative 196, add up to negative 45, leaving me with my two factors here, 4x, negative 49x. I'm going to plug in my information from my original trinomial, and then I'm going to add in my two factors I found. All right, now I'm going to factor out of this first one an x. So I'm leaving me with 7x plus 4. Now, out of my second set of parentheses, you notice that both numbers are negative. So we're going to factor out that negative as well. So I'm going to factor out a negative 7, leaving me with 7x plus 4. All right, so we divided out a negative from each of those terms. So our final answer here, x minus 7 and 7x plus 4.